Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Schellenfeld with the International Grief Institute, and this is Moments of Hope, a show featuring people who turn pain into purpose and do good things in the world. Tonight, we are talking about dating dangers, especially for widows. And my guest tonight is Dianne West. Dianne is the National Volunteer Coordinator for Soaring Spirits International. She is active with Camp Widow, and she is co-author of a couple of books in the Grief Diaries series. So welcome to the show tonight, Dianne.
Thank you, Linda. It's great to be here.
It is good to see you. You are out and about. You're doing a lot of things out in the world. And so I'm honored that you have time to join me tonight because we're talking about a very important topic, something that you have lived. And we're going to share details of that. But first, I want to share with viewers that we are having a windstorm here. And so we're going to cross our fingers that our power stays on and we can give you a full show tonight. If you have comments or questions for Dianne, feel free to post them in the thread, and we'll get to as many as we can. And so, with all of that aside, Dianne, you were married for a very long time to your high school sweetheart, Vern, and he died in 2010 of myeloma.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, how long were you married?
We were married 41 years.
Wow, long time. And
you've got married. Yeah, we have one son, unmarried, 42-year-old son.
Okay.
And,
okay.
Yeah, he who has moved in with me more recently. He's moved in with me, so it was kind of nice to have somebody back in the house again.
Yeah. And so you've written about your story in the Grief Diaries book series, and you have been authentic and candid and heartfelt about your journey through losing Vern to cancer and what that was like, right down to the weight loss, watching him decline and knowing that at some point they've done all they can to save him, and then returning home alone with Vern having passed. What was that like?
That's probably one of the hardest things I've done. I think the hardest thing was being his caregiver for 4.5 years. He went through an awful lot, and that was one of those things where I felt like I was living my wedding vows. I saw him through in sickness and in health, and it was a gift that I'm grateful I was able to give to him. Being alone, it was the first time in my entire life I was ever alone. I went right from being in high school to being married. So I never spent any time alone at all. And so it was a scary time. I didn't know how to be just Dianne. I had been Dianne and Vern. We were a package deal. So it was not my best time during those first couple of years. A lot of trials and errors. Some things from the outside, I looked like I was doing quite well, but I was keeping a lot of secrets at home of how I was truly living, and I'm just very grateful that I was able to come out of that.
Yeah, I think about the transition that widows face, and it's things that we don't think about. Things like you returning home to the marital bed that's now one of you sleeping in it, not two of you, and the adjustment of that to things like taking care of things around the house that your spouse would have done, and changing the oil in the car, doing the furnace filter, things like that typically the man of the house takes care of, and suddenly that's all on your shoulders. And you also have loss of an income usually. And, so it's more losses than just loss of a spouse. How long do you feel it took you to find your footing? Because not just were you grieving the loss of your beloved, of Vern, your husband of 41 years, but it was that transition, grieving the transition to a life without him. How long do you think it took to find your footing?
Well, I think it's different for everyone. And as I said, I was really living two different lives. I went back to work immediately. I immersed myself in the job. I acted like the old Dianne when I was there. I kept my tears to myself. If I was feeling that, I closed my office door and dealt with it. And put on makeup and came back out, acting like everything was fine. But at home, it was, when I got home from work on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, I put on my pajamas. I didn't answer the door. I didn't take phone calls. I didn't do anything until Monday morning when I had to go back to work. I wouldn't recommend that to others, but for me, that it worked. It worked because eventually I was able to come together and figure out that that wasn't the life that it was not honoring the years I had with my husband. That if I couldn't get a handle on this, it would reflect on him, and I wasn't willing to let that happen. So I made a conscious effort that I had to get back out into the world and start doing some things. And so I signed up for the Broadway series of the new theater that came into Las Vegas, and I forced myself out the door. I went to Brave Girl Camp. I went to Camp Widow and met people there. I got involved in Widow Village, and I just started doing some other things for other people that also then helped me to kind of come back out of that space, that negative space that I had been in.
Sure. It takes a lot of courage. It's almost a rebuilding of self, discovering who you are on your own.
Right.
Not just
right.
part of a pair.
Yes.
But
I didn't think I had any value on my own. I truly went through that period of just thinking no one was going to care about just Dianne. I had to finally start caring about me, myself, in order to understand that that was the most important thing. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What a lesson. And so you, again, spent 41 years married to Vern, and then you're going through a transition of rebuilding of self and what it means to be Dianne. Mm-hmm. At what point did you feel you were ready to maybe dip your toe into the dating pool?
It took 7.5 years before I felt that. It was earlier this year. It shocked me. I thought I stood on the soapbox for all of the widowed people I know who say, I will never, ever date. I will never be partner. I truly believed that. I didn't feel that.
Oh, I've got Dianne frozen. We'll give it a second here and see if
there was.
Oh, there you are. No, we're frozen again. We're going to give her a minute to see if she comes in. Dianne, if you can hear me, go ahead and refresh your browser. I'll see if that works. Viewers, if you don't mind hanging in there with me. Technology. It's a blessing, but it can be temperamental. There she comes.
I talked with other people. I just kept exploring things. Wrote about it a lot in my blog. I'm really honest in my blog, so I threw a whole lot of stuff out there. And finally, a girlfriend who she's about 3 years out. She wanted me to meet somebody she knew. I initially told her no, I wasn't at all interested. I said, I'm thinking about dating, but I'm not ready for it yet.
And that was earlier this year?
That was in May. That was in, I think she initially asked me like in March or April, and I said no. And then in May, I ended up saying yes. Okay, what was it going to hurt? So the three of us met first just for me to get comfortable. I will tell you, I felt like a teenager. I was as nervous as I could have been. I mean, I haven't dated since I was a senior in high school, way back in 1969. So the idea of that was, it was almost more than I could handle. And so we went out, we had a nice evening just, at happy hour. And then he asked me to dinner. And I went to dinner. He was a nice man, but I'm one who I feel I've got big feelings. And so if I'm going to care about somebody, I know that right off the bat. I immediately have a connection with somebody. This could be somebody that would be a very good friend of mine, or this is somebody that, no, there's nothing there. And there just wasn't anything there with this particular man. And so I declined a second date with him and just figured I wasn't going to do any kind of dating. And then my friend talked me into eHarmony. So I thought, well, I've heard of eHarmony. A couple of people I know through Camp Widow, they met their current husbands in eHarmony. It's supposed to be a safe place. So I decided to try eHarmony. It was not an easy thing filling out that profile. It still made me question whether I was doing the right thing or not. But I went ahead and did it. And
did you ever feel when you were doing that, did you ever feel like you were cheating on Vern?
So I've had other people ask me that. I thought that I might feel that way, but I didn't. I talk to Vern all the time, and I know he would be fine with that. Do I still feel he's my husband? Yes. He is my husband. He's just not here physically with me. So it's not something that I felt that I was cheating. I really did not have those feelings at all. Mine was more of an insecurity on my own part of, Allie, it's been nearly 8 years. No one's approached me in all those 8 years. I've been told that I have, I put up this wall and everybody knew I had this wall that said, Dianne doesn't want to date. But, I just was really concerned about, is this the right thing for me to do? That was my bigger concern. So I put myself out there. I said I was widowed. I said that I hadn't dated in a very long time, that I wanted to go slow. I put all these things in there and I got no interest. I mean, zero interest.
And so what do you think you put out there that got no interest?
Well, my friend said, "Oh, you're being way too honest. You need to just talk about yourself, as a woman. You don't mention that you're widowed. Don't mention that you want to go slow. Don't, and so I took all of that stuff off. I thought, okay, let me try it that way. I did it that way for maybe 2 days, but it just didn't feel genuine. It was like, but that's not who I am, is this other person. And if nobody wants that person, well, okay, then I guess I was right. These previous 7.5 years, I guess I was right. So I let it go. And I think it was 2 days later, this very nice looking man, expressed an interest. And, so we started talking on eHarmony, and, it felt nice. It felt nice to be able to talk to a man. It felt nice to be able to share those things with him. Oh goodness, the dog has come in. Sheila.
Oh, okay. We love dogs.
Yeah, and she's on the bed, which is where the Jim, I need your help. So she now to get my train of thought back.
That's okay. So this gentleman, you met this gentleman, and you were talking, and it seemed like it was going well. When you were talking, was it through emails? Was it through Facebook messages? Was it through LinkedIn? Was it?
No, we started out totally on eHarmony, which, I am the administrator for our online community, Widowed Village. So I know that we have scammers out there. I know we have people trying to come in pretending to be things that they're not. So I'm aware of all those things. And one of the first things is that if they want to take you off the site, that's a huge red flag. And so I knew that. So initially we were just talking on Match. And he was asking me a lot of questions. That to me is another thing that I would say is a red flag. Lots of questions. And there again, I was vulnerable. I had somebody showing interest in me for the first time. And I was very honest in my responses. And I'm also very public. My blog is very public and shares a whole lot of stuff. And so it was very easy for him to be able to pinpoint every one of my vulnerabilities. And he was able to use that. He said the right things. He responded the right way to everything. So we did that for a while, and then he suggested email. And there were some things he wanted to send some pictures, which would have been easier to do. And they weren't any of those bad pictures, which I've heard sometimes that does happen where sometimes men will send, very intimate pictures. He did not do that, but he just wanted to send me some other things. And so I gave him my email address, and we exchanged, emails then for a while. And then we went to text messaging. So I gave him my phone number. Another thing I would not recommend doing. I understand now there's an opportunity you can use. Google can give you a fake number that you give that will turn around and ring in on your cell phone. I didn't know that initially, but that would be a safer thing than giving my personal number. So we chatted, that way too. He supposedly lived in Henderson, which is where I live. So I felt he was local. That was a good thing. But then in talking with him, he actually said, well, he was down in, I forget now, was it Yuma or Tucson, Arizona, and that he had a place there too. And he was in the military, another red flag. Many of them say that they're in the military because it gives them that opportunity to say, I'm traveling. I had to go overseas. I'm not going to be available. Now it gives them that opportunity to just play the game. He also sent a lot of personal messages, saying a lot of really nice things, complimenting me, feeding what I had been missing for quite some time. Not, I wasn't getting any of those nice thoughts and nice comments. And so he fed into all of that too. And it wasn't until there was one evening, and we would talk, but it was all online. We would talk for hours, and it felt very good. He felt very real. I felt like I knew him. And then he sent me an email that didn't. When I first read it, it didn't sound like him. There was just something about it that was a little bit different. And it just kind of made me question. I didn't ask him, but I just thought, gee, that was odd. I think I might have even said, that email just didn't sound like you. And he says, well, I was writing it real quickly, or so, he made some excuse. And I just bought into it. And I went to bed that night. And I couldn't get that out of my mind. Now,
we're frozen again. Uh-oh. Viewers, Diana's frozen on my end. I'm not quite sure what you're seeing on your end, but if you can hang tight with us once again, we'll see if we can get Diane plugged back in.
And up popped like 25, the same email being sent by 25 different people to other people. I mean, I guess it was an email, but it was showing up in all these scammer sites. So that was my first sign of like, okay.
And so how long was this from the time that you first met him on eHarmony to the time that you started getting the red flags?
5 days, only 5 days. I think I'm very, very lucky that that whether it was Vern, the universe, or just finally my knowledge just clicking in, telling me something just doesn't seem right with this. But even in the midst of that, even after I saw that, I still wanted to believe. And it sounds somewhat pathetic, and I'm embarrassed by it. But I felt it was important to say because I think so many of us, we just we're looking for that connection. We're looking for someone to care about us. And so the fact that he seemed to care seemed to be more important than the fact that something wasn't feeling just right.
And so did you call him out on it?
Yeah, I did. Not initially, not immediately. I kept digging. I stayed up most of that night digging for things. I kept trying to find his pictures. And I couldn't find anything online. I had already checked him out. I'd already tried to verify that he was who he said he was, but he had an excuse for that. He had an excuse saying that, he was in the military under special ops, which, now just makes me laugh that I was that foolish, but it seemed to make sense. When I questioned him about that, he sent me a copy of his passport. It looked as real as a passport you could see. It was the page. It had where he was born, his name, the photo. It looked very real. So when I saw that, it was like, okay, he is real. And he sent me some other photos. And so, I believed him. And it ended up where I checked some of the more personal things that he had said. I decided to go in and do the Google thing for that too. And I found those words too. And that was kind of like the final straw where I felt like, okay, Dianne, you are smarter than this. So I called him out. And the part that scares me a little bit on this is that had he responded differently, I would have continued with him. Even knowing all of those things, I probably would have. But instead he got angry. And he spewed out all sorts of ugliness of how dare I question him. And, he was going slow because that was what I had asked for and all of this other stuff. And so at that point, it was like, okay, I did the right thing. I ended up reporting him to eHarmony, and I blocked him on my phone, blocked him on my email. So I at least took care of those things. I worried that, I made myself vulnerable to some other things. I'm very lucky that I got out before he started asking for money. And I will just admit, I'm really a very intelligent woman who is around all of this stuff, every day I run into this stuff in Widowed Village, and yet I fell for it. And so it just kind of scares me to think of all the other women out there that could do the same thing.
Well, it just goes to show how skilled these scammers are. Mm-hmm. And, someone, because you are highly intelligent, you are in the widow community, you're well versed in it, all the ins and outs. You've seen horror stories of people taken advantage of. We read it in the news of widows who have been scammed out of their life savings, the mortgage, the equity in their home. And yet it happens because these scammers are so skilled. I mean, it is what they do. What's really interesting was I've got some information here from the FBI about, let me find my notes here, that according to the FBI, they report that romance fraud is now among the top 3 internet crimes, and it's growing. Mm-hmm. That's what's shocking. Mm-hmm. Is that it's growing. Most online fraud happens to women 50 or older and who are widowed or vulnerable. Those behind the scams manipulate the victim and endear themselves to gain their trust. When you question their trust, they get angry. Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that? But that's apparently, just as you experience, it's classic behavior of a scammer. Right. What's really interesting, according to the FBI, is it happens on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you think of LinkedIn as a professional, social media site, right? As a professional platform, and yet they are on there, and it's happened to me as well, and I'm not widowed. And my profile picture on Facebook is with my husband, and yet I still get the same. They're in the military, and you're beautiful, and this, that, and the other, and it's like, who says that to a stranger? So, with that being said, what happened to your heart when you realized that this was fraud? This was not a real human. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, why I say it that way. But, you were married for so many years. You waited, 7.5 years before dipping your toe in the dating pool, only to find yourself as a victim. Yeah. What did that do to your heart?
Oh boy. Yeah. It sent me way down. I'm a very positive person. but there were a couple of days there where and luckily only a couple of days, but there were a couple of days I couldn't get out of bed. The tears were just right there. I was embarrassed. I was hurt. My heart was hurt. People said, "How could you have fallen for somebody in just a few short days?" That's who I am. Unfortunately, that's how it happened with my husband and I.
For my husband and I,
he wasn't my high school sweetheart. He had been one of my teachers, but we met at a party after I graduated, and it was just a very fast, from first date to marriage was 11 weeks. And so I have a history of that, of being a positive thing. So for me, when my heart was there, it was not that wasn't surprising to me as much as it was to so many other people. And I just, I was depressed. My son was very worried about me. He didn't really know what to do or how to help me. But after I came out of it, he made that comment that, he made a couple of comments. Number one, he asked to read the stuff that this guy had sent me. And he said, "Okay, you've got to let me read this stuff." Because he said, "Mom, guys don't talk like that." With all the flower, all the really lovely things that he was saying, he says, "Really, Mom, I could have told you this guy was not real." I didn't even think to share any of that with him, but he was adamant that if I had, he would have been able to tell me. But he also said how worried he was about me because he had never ever seen me in that state. So my heart was. I don't know that I want to say broken, but I've just felt so very fragile that I had made such a huge error, and that I had been so foolish, and I just really beat myself up over that. So luckily, it just took a few days for me to come out of that.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that that's one of the things that victims experience, and why they don't come forward is because they feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
And, you shouldn't feel embarrassed. You were the victim of a professional scammer.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not alone.
I know. I know that after writing my blog post, I've had several people I know who have approached me privately and have shared with me they too were victims, and some of them did lose money. Some of them got to that point where they were impacted financially. So
they
I think
the lines.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I applaud you for sharing your story, because it takes a lot of courage to share, the vulnerability that we feel when we're thinking that we're ready to maybe, life holds a possibility of romance after loss of a spouse. And, then to find yourself a victim of this, I can see where that would be embarrassing, but I'm grateful that you're sharing your story, because you're going to prevent other people from experiencing that same kind of devastation. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about how to spot a con man. And I've got some bullet points that I want to share. And I'd like to also pick your brain. What were red flags for you and looking back? And so ways to spot a con man. And again, this is from the FBI. Look at their profiles, especially if you meet them on Facebook. Are their profiles new? If you go and you look, sometimes, and some of them are very skilled in this. So it's not, oops, we lost Dianne again. There we go. There you go. Yeah. And so their profiles are recently created, and they'll show a whole bunch of photos in a short time frame of like maybe 24 hours. And oftentimes it will show them with children. So they portray themselves as a single man, a widower themselves, or divorcee, or divorced. But if you look at the profiles, they have very few friends, or their only friends are women who are divorced or widowed. They list very little personal information and likely live across the country or abroad. They often describe themselves as a good man, or they're honest, or they love God. They also use endearing names so they don't mistake one victim for another. I thought that was really interesting.
Yes.
Because as much as we want to think, we were their sole interest, as scammers, they are victimizing multiple people
Right.
in the same, hour. And so moving on for the FBI, their profile of the imposters, the imposter will immediately ask for an email address or phone number. Did that happen to you where he immediately asked for it, or because of eHarmony,
it went for a little while, but I think it was within within a day or so that yes, then he asked for the phone number and email. Yeah.
Okay, so pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. What the FBI says about that is they need an alternative way to stay in touch, because as soon as the dating site identifies them as a fraud, their profiles are removed. Right. And so if they still have victims in the works, they want to have an alternate way to continue grooming that victim. And they also use the same pickup lines. You're gorgeous. I love you. Things that women like to hear, whether you're vulnerable or not. Who doesn't want to hear that? Right. So, even us married women, it still feels good, even if we're not. I'm happily married over 25 years to my dearly beloved, but still something about those magic words. You're pretty. You're good looking, or you have a pretty smile, or what have you. There's still something instinctive in women that think, oh, that sounds, that feels good. It feels good to anybody. So the imposters also often say that they're a dedicated family man, yet they often have no children or siblings, at least in their story, right? So okay, and here's what the FBI wants you to know, is that these are actually, and this is what was so shocking to me, and hearing your story, Dianne, I can see now a lot of the correlations, but what the FBI wants you to know is that these are well-run criminal enterprises. They are businesses. Right. And they communicate with several people posing as one. And so that's like your one email that didn't sound like your original. It probably wasn't, according to the FBI. And the organization, the two top organizations that they operate out of is North Korea and Liberia. So interesting. And they also they use large call centers, because again, this is an organization, this is a business. And so, they're very sophisticated in how they're doing this. And so I think that it's really important to pass along those details, because unless you experience it and then you have hindsight, how would you know these things? Right.
Well, and even when you are aware of those, it's just, that's the part that's shocking to me, because I knew that they're part of, it's an organization. I have this picture of this large warehouse with lots of phones and computers set up, and all of these, the ones that I've seen in Widow Village, a lot have come from Nigeria. So I just picture them in this large warehouse, and they all have access to all of these emails that they can pick and choose. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this one in, and that it's quite an enterprise. And yet, when it became personal, somehow they got through the intelligent part of me that knows that, and got into my heart. I can't explain it, but they're very, they probably have psychologists and people helping them to know what to do and how to say and the questions to ask, because they're very good. They're very good at it.
Right. And as well-run enterprises, they're making billions of dollars. Yes. From it. So it's a high profit margin. And so, you're right in that they do have people who are telling them, here's what to say. Here's how to groom someone, and, tell them that you're, in the Army or the, whatever, special ops. Everyone loves a hero, right? How dare we question a hero? And yet they all seem to be special ops, and the poor special ops that are really authentic out there, serving our country in that way, putting their own life on the line. How terrible that criminals are, impostering themselves like that.
Well, and they're snatching those photos too. The photos that they use are not, photos of any of them. They are photos that I finally, after spending hours, I finally found the photos that my person had used, and they were stolen off of an actor's site, an actor from the UK. And the only reason I found that was I found another site that I went to. It's called mailscammers.com, where you can look up and see. And I found some of the words that he had used, someone else had reported, completely different name that he used, a completely different profile picture, but it was the same words. And so then I kept searching, found someone else who had a picture that was the same. So I dug in and found it. And so as soon as I saw that, that was kind of like the final thing where I finally believed, okay, yeah, this was totally a scam, because there were the pictures and it was this, this actor. And they steal the photos of the military men too. They'll pull those. I mean, I didn't know that military didn't need to have a regular passport. So the passport that he sent me, if I'd known that, I could have questioned it. They have their special military passports. They don't look like our passports. I didn't know that. So.
And I didn't either. I mean, why would we know that?
Yeah.
Unless we were in the military. Mm-hmm. And so when you reported him to eHarmony, what came from that?
Well, they don't give you a whole lot. I reported it, and then the next day I got an email saying that, that someone I had been interacting with had been reported. They didn't even acknowledge that it was me, and that they had been removed, and that if I had been communicating with him offline, they recommended that I cease doing that. And that was as much as I got, from them. Okay. I left eHarmony at that point. I just thought this was just not a good thing. So I paid ahead of time. So, they won't let you just leave. So they keep you in there, but you can stop receiving the emails. You can start receiving the matches. I removed the app from my phone, and I thought, okay, I'm done. If I'm supposed to meet somebody, I will meet them through a friend or just organically during my activities. That was how I felt for about I guess it was maybe a week. And then my friend said, why don't you try Match? And after all of that, yes, I did.
Well, I want to go back to the red flags. What do you want viewers to know?
Yeah, well, I wrote myself a note on that. Not wanting to talk on the phone, that's another red flag. My fella, his name was Jeff. He had every excuse you to be surprised when you hear an accent. Now, saying that now, it would be like, oh, well, of course I should have been aware. But his passport showed that he had been born in Dusseldorf. So I just jumped in and said, well, of course I would expect you that if you grew up there. I forget whether it was the mother or the father that he said was German, and his father, I think it was the father, was military. And so I discounted that. I said, oh, well, that wouldn't surprise me. As it turned out, later on when I was doing all of my research to see these words, I found those exact words that he had used trying to explain why his voice might not sound what I expected. That was part of the whole scammy stuff. Others had used those same words. So, but at the time, at the time I believed it. Having an excuse why you can't meet immediately. I thought he lived in my same little town, my same little area. And yet, he had an excuse why we couldn't meet. I now know that to be also, a red flag that they need to get you to a point, where they've really sucked you right in so they can start talking about the money, of why they need money. And so meeting, just isn't an option, especially if they're not even in the country. But, you don't think that at the time. Let's see. Yeah. Suggesting leaving the dating site. That was one. And as I said, my son said being too complimentary, I guess I was hungry for those words. But if there's too much of that, that's a sign. As you mentioned from the FBI, yes, he had a term. He always called me sunshine. The profile picture I had at the time, I had a yellow sweater on, and so that was his term. I now know that was so that he didn't mix me up with someone else.
Yeah.
The thing I found also was that some of the things he said didn't always match what he had put in his profile on eHarmony. So there'd be just little things that weren't quite right, and if I questioned that, he would come up with a response that seemed plausible to me. But there again, that's a red flag, because when they're trying to be somebody that they're not, they can sometimes make those mistakes. Pet name, not finding any social media accounts. I found nothing on him. And I pay for a service that I use for Widowed Village intake, and I couldn't find him on that either. Well, now I know why, but his excuse was because he's special ops, he has to maintain no social profile at all. I'm not military. I don't have any military in my family. That made sense to me. So I bought into that. The passport, I will say, golly, that thing, they are very, very good. Whoever they have doing that is really expert, because the photo was perfect. All of the typeface, everything matched the background, that's on your passport. Everything was just spot on. So they definitely are professionals. Noticing the time of day too. That's another thing. It wasn't so much for me, but I've heard that from others. They will disappear at certain times. Well, that can kind of tell you that they're in a different country, a completely different time zone. So when you're up and awake, they are not, or they're sending messages, during the time that, based on where they say they live, they should be asleep. Or if they say they work, during work hours, they're constantly sending you those messages. So if you pay attention to those times, that can also be a clue that something isn't quite right. The other thing that I find interesting, it happens on Facebook a lot, and I've had it in Widowed Village, and also with this fella. They seem to use first names for both their first and last name. So my guy's name was Jeff Douglas, or there could be Stephen William, or so they use those two first names. It happens a lot. I mean, so it must be something that they've not even thought about, but it's what they're told to do, because it's very, very common. Military, so that's photos still, yeah, and the background check I would say would be really worthwhile, especially if you're going to end up meeting someone. If you're going to meet them in person, I would definitely pay. I think sometimes you can just pay a certain fee just to go in and do one background check. If you're going to meet somebody in person, it's probably a good idea to do that.
And so where would you do a background check?
Well, I use BEEN Verified, BEEN Verified, and okay. I can go in there. I can put a person's name in. It will end up showing me whether I've got a visitor again. It will end up showing me whether.
Pet therapy at its finest.
Well, I've not had a pet, but she is pretty wonderful. So I can't. So been verified. There's oh goodness, there's several of them. I think if you go online, I think there's several that you can just go in to say background checks to check them out. I'm thinking one is called Spokio. That's another one. And just to go in and do the check. It will tell you a lot. I mean, as far as how much you can pay extra to get even more details, but to show if they've got any warrants, any criminal history, that sort of thing. Granted, with these folks that are not real, you're not going to find anything. When I checked him out, nothing came up. Absolutely nothing. So that's a red flag. Yes, that is definitely a red flag. Okay. And I would say on Facebook, the thing that people should look to on Facebook, a lot of them are coming in, they're not even looking at your profile picture. I rarely have my picture as my profile, and yet I'll get these messages, saying something lovely about me, and yet all I've got up there is a quotation or a photo of a sunset or something. So they're not really looking at me. They're just blasting these out, just hoping to be able to get somebody to respond. But if you look at that too, quite often you'll see if they haven't blocked their friends, you'll look and you'll see a whole bunch of, well, in my case, a lot of them, Nigerians. You'll see all of these young male Nigerians as their friends. And here this person is supposedly lieutenant colonel in the army. Okay. It doesn't make sense. And another thing I have recommended to so many people, don't accept a friend request from someone that you don't know just because one of your friends has already accepted them. They may not be checking things out. They may have done the same thing. Oh, well, Susie's their friend, so of course I'll accept them. But Susie didn't check. And so that's how they continue to get more and more people. And they're wanting access to all your friends, because then they can say, oh, well, I'm a friend of Dianne's, so yes, all these other people are going to go ahead and approve me too. And that gives me that much more of an outreach. So just be very cautious of accepting any kind of friend request from men you don't know.
Well, and so with everything that you've been through, with, dipping your toe into the dating pool and having learned the hard way about just how, successful these scammers are, it didn't turn you off from trying again. So where are you today?
Yeah, shocked. I'm totally shocked, because I would not have guessed that I would have tried again. And especially the date that I chose to join Match. It was, again, one of those things that just felt like it was a message from Vern. It was on the anniversary of his death, which is usually a really, really hard day for me. And I was trying to decide what to do that day, how to honor the day, how to spend it. And I just, this thought popped into my head, join Match. And I actually was having a conversation with Vern. I've got this big picture over the fireplace. And I just said, are you kidding me? I don't think I can I just don't think I can do this again. I'm smart enough that I probably won't get scammed again. But if nobody likes me there again, I'm hurt. It's not doing anything good for my ego. So I kind of played around with it for the day and just, kept kind of chatting with him. And I ended up just feeling like, okay, something is telling me I'm supposed to join Match. So I joined Match. And I was in it for maybe a week or so, had a little bit of interest, nothing that clicked, nothing that worked. And again, I was feeling that vulnerability of, all my other friends that are on dating sites are getting constant. People are just constantly, it's hurting you. You will meet somebody someday, but you just not on Match. So I took his advice and I went in and I got rid of it. I said, no more emails, no more, none of that. And the next morning I wake up and there's in my inbox, there are 2 messages, and it says this person likes you and this person sent you a message. And I thought, okay, why? I'm not supposed to be getting any messages. Why am I getting this? But there again, that little voice said, what have you got to lose? Go ahead and open it up. So I opened it up and looked at his profile, and it was a picture of him holding this little puppy that was just adorable. And the second picture was him standing by his Harley motorcycle. I went, well, okay, he looks kind of interesting. And he was living in Pahrump, which is about an hour away from Las Vegas. It's over the mountain. Okay. And so I responded to his message where he apparently I had liked him. I guess in Match, when you get these people that they say are your matches, you have to either say you like them or you send them away. And so I had apparently liked him. So because I did that, that's why he was responding to me. And so I responded and said, I tried to get out of Match yesterday. I don't know that I even want to be doing this anymore. I haven't dated in 49 years, since I was a senior in high school. I don't know the protocols. I don't know any of this stuff. And so, it was a really negative, kind of a response. And his response back to me was, well, I haven't dated in 51 years. And I thought, Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't expecting that. So that sounded interesting. So, and he said, I don't know the rules either. I just like to end up meeting somebody that I could have some adventures with, and we'd have a good friendship. And so we just started talking, and we talked for hours online in Match. He then did ask for my phone number, which I initially was concerned about because I thought, okay, that's a red flag. But I'd felt comfortable enough in the things that he was saying that I thought, well, let me give it a try. I'll just be real cautious. And the first words out of his mouth were, and he sounded like a regular guy. First words were, I've got some questions for you. And I went, oh, there we go. There's those questions again. But they were simple, like, do you have cats? Because I said no, and that was a good thing because he's allergic to them. Do you like to fish? I said, I've never fished, but I'm willing to learn. Do you like to camp? I said, never camped. Don't think I'd like, so I didn't respond well to the questions, but apparently it was enough that we just kept talking. And he FaceTimed me, and there he was. That picture, that FaceTime was the person who was on the profile. And so it felt safe. And so it has now been 2 months tomorrow that we've been seeing one another, and I'm spending a lot of time in Pahrump. It feels very nice to have somebody that I care about, who cares about me. I love his puppy Sheila, and so it's been a little bit hard to kind of reconcile my life of what I created during those 7.5, 8 years of trying to fill my life with all sorts of stuff so that I wouldn't be lonely. I do a tremendous amount of volunteering, and trying to integrate a new person, especially a person who lives an hour away, into that life has been a little bit difficult, a little bit hard, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Well, I'm happy for you. First off, that this time he answered the questions all the right way.
Yes.
Yes. I've not dated either. And, best of luck to you. And I'm so glad that, you joined us tonight to share your story. And, I just want to close with this, that, I'm not a widow, I'm a bereaved mother, but I've heard from widows and widowers alike that when they do find someone else, if they choose to, and open their hearts and find someone else, they don't replace their spouse that died. They discover that they can love someone else differently.
Right.
And so your heart can hold more than one love. Just like those of us that have more than one child, you can love each of them differently.
Right.
And yet it's a love that you can't, quantify. So same with the spouse. So, good for you. I'm really grateful that you shared your story with us, and best of luck to you and in this new adventure. And all the wonderful times ahead, the memories that are in the making. So how can our viewers contact you if they've got questions, if they want to learn more about Soaring Spirits International or Camp Widow or Widow Village? Where can they contact you?
They can contact me at Dianne@soaringspirits.org, and it's DIANNE at soaringspirits, all one word, .org.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight, Dianne. I really appreciate it. And for those of you that are on Facebook a lot, I will be co-hosting a Coping with the Holiday show this Thursday with Jan Warner of Grief Speaks Out. So if you're struggling with the